Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Good morning. Happy
morning.
music.
Welcome to Black Friday. We're both.
Oh, we are.
black
Oh, we
today.
didn't. That was
coordinate
not
it.
planned,
No.
but it works.
Yeah. Rarely anything planned in my attire. For sure.
Yeah.
Reach in the closet.
Well, I
and
think
grab
that
it.
he sees what I'm wearing, and it's like a subconscious thing. It's like, oh,
You think that's it?
maybe I'm
Oh.
gonna, we're like connected subconsciously on our wardrobe or
Oh.
something. It's weird.
Yeah. Okay.
Friday.
Yep. We wrapped up a couple of V8 meetings this week, and we've got 2 more for the month. We've got our Group 5, which is the new group that's 500 to 2,000 accounts. Really some great operators in there. 3 of the first 4 members in that group are women.
I just think that's awesome. I really, really do. That thrills me.
It doesn't surprise me. It's interesting, and so I'm really eager to kind of get to know them and get to know their operations more. We've had one meeting with that group so far.
I noticed that you, on a lot of the social media stuff, that when people say things like, "Hey, fellas," or whatever, you're like,
you saw me chime in on
fellas?
that.
It's not just fellas. How about hey dealers or whatever? Because there are a growing number of women in the industry, and let's just remember that.
Let's move beyond phrases like car guys. So
car peeps, or something.
Some really great operators out there that are women, and they certainly deserve to be included in these conversations. So, and they are. We just got to make sure we do better about our phrasing. That's
absolutely
all. So
I'm so grateful for the morning show. I was just thinking this morning, it's like one of the only things that keeps me. What day of the week is it?
Yeah, your life is a bit of a blur lately.
My life is a bit of a blur, and it's just like it's a routine every day of the same kind of things, and so I wake up in the morning. It's like, okay, what day does it matter?
You must feel pretty rudderless on Monday now that we dropped the morning show on Monday.
I do.
Yeah.
It's like I get there's no weekend, but that's okay.
And then one more quick mention on the V8 thing. We've got our Group 3 meeting, which is the newcomer group that we currently have established, and we've got I think 3 or 4 seats available in that one. So reach out if you're a newcomer and you want to be able to sit with other dealers, get some group coaching.
You can sign up at any time. If you want to get into this month's, then let us know ASAP. So we can get you in for this month. And then, but we are poised to grow and ready for that. So however many people want to join us,
I want the newcomers to know that when they sit in that group, it's mostly group coaching, and that we are able to share with them numbers and how other dealers numbers look, and why we calculate and recommend they track certain numbers.
And so it's kind of like an aggregate average and things like that that you present when you're doing the new group, because a lot of them don't even know what to look for or why these numbers are important. And
we talk about whatever the issues are at hand. Like, for example, I have a customer who filed bankruptcy. What should I do about
That's a great
bankruptcy?
segue,
Oh,
honey.
Yeah?
That's really great segue.
I'm 350 episodes into this practice. So.
We have a special guest today, and it was based on, we have Stephen frequently. And let's just go ahead and bring him in, and we will
we'll talk about
we'll start talking. So Steve Levine, you just put Steve on your thing. So Steve Levine, and you're with Ignite Consulting, and I plug this book all the time. And so whenever we talk about things that are about compliance, I have this book, and then we also got one from Hudson Cook. And so it's like, if you don't have these books in your library, get them. Good information. You're welcome.
And I'll give you a scoop. I'll tell you all first. I'm actually working on the follow-up. I hope to have it out sometime next year.
Fantastic.
And also, you mentioned before we kicked off that you have an upcoming webinar that you're planning to bring this bankruptcy conversation into that as well, right?
Yes, I've been getting a lot of questions about bankruptcy lately, so I thought it was a good idea to revisit the topic and
Yeah.
dedicate a webinar to it. It's going to be third Tuesday of October,
Right on.
whatever that is.
Very good.
So the topic today came from a post that was about a week ago.
Probably
week or
maybe a
two
little
ago.
more.
But I think it was more than a week ago because we weren't able to get you that same week. So and it was on well, bankruptcies sound like they're on the rise.
15%.
15%. Okay, so bankruptcies are on the rise, and there was a question posed about how to handle different parts of bankruptcy, and just listen. I mean, I troll Facebook for stuff about buy here, pay here all the time, and so I'm just reading through all these different, this and this and speaking from authority, or whatever. You should do this. You should do this, and then Steve pipes in. And it's like, oh, geez.
Pump the brakes, y'all. Pump the brakes. Yeah.
Pump the brakes. And Steve, we were talking before the show started. He's like, I don't comment very much anymore, but when this one came up, I did.
And I'm glad you did. We sometimes invite you, though. So the conversation was around bankruptcy and how to handle my customer file bankruptcy and what's next. And so, Steve, you saw, like I saw, and as a non-attorney with some peripheral, exposure to those things, I thought, oh, some of those answers are way off. And so we're going to get dealers in trouble if we don't clarify some of those
one
pieces.
thing to be like compliant with CARS rule and all of the stuff, and bankruptcy is like another big section of that. There's stuff you got to do.
Yeah. So just share with us kind of what you saw in that thread, Steve, and kind of what you feel like people need to know about that.
So I think the first thing folks need to know when it comes to bankruptcy is, it's a federal law. Very often when folks want to comment, that they start referring back to state law, and bankruptcy is a federal law. Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to be the same every place, but as somebody that used to practice, when I did bankruptcy work, I practiced in Dallas, Fort Worth. And there were 3 judges at the time in Dallas. There was 1 in Fort Worth. And even though it's the same law every place, how the judge interprets that law could be a little bit different. So I may be in one court at 10 o'clock in the morning and have a judge rule one way, and then at 11 o'clock, judge has a slightly different. So yeah, that does happen. Plus, and I think I actually mentioned this in the book, and people don't believe me, there's something called local rules and local rules. And, yeah, local rules. And
wow.
And that is basically the bankruptcy judge's rules to the lawyers that practice in front of them about how certain things are going to be handled. So it's really important when you have this discussion. I tell my clients, I do not practice in bankruptcy court anymore. But I tell my clients, it's very important that you identify somebody in your area that does have that knowledge. Creditor's rights attorney is what they're called.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you have a hard time finding one, reach out to me. I'll help you identify one. It's really good to have a relationship with one so that if something happens and you've got to act quickly, you're not scurrying around trying to find somebody, that you've actually got somebody that has some familiarity with your business and can take action right away.
Okay. So the local and the local rules, they still abide by the federal rules, correct?
Yeah, yes, but for instance, a local rule may say that I want the parties to try to work out anything having to do with the lift of stay prior to filing a motion. And I want everybody, if a motion is filed, I want them to certify that, yes, we've had that conversation and we were not able to reach agreement.
Okay.
Interesting. So that is a really, really wise, what you're suggesting to everybody that they do is they find someone in their area, in their jurisdiction, I guess, is that what it's called? Like
yes.
In their jurisdiction that understands the laws when it comes to bankruptcy, and you gave it a name.
Yes.
And
I'll give you a great example.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court came out with an opinion case. It was a City of Chicago versus Fulton, and it had to do with the impound of a vehicle. And the Supreme Court looked at the facts and ruled a certain way and said, okay, wait a second. Yes, there's an automatic stay when the bankruptcy is filed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the vehicle can't be disposed of. Okay. And this involved impounds. This didn't involve a creditor repossessing a vehicle, but a lot of that conversation is analogous to the situation that dealers and finance companies face.
Interesting.
So it's important to ask your local attorney, has that judge had an opportunity to rule on that type of case? Because judges are interpreting that case differently. Yeah. And, my whole career, practically, my advice was when you take the car and then the customer files bankruptcy, you have to give it back because the property is the property of the estate at that point, and you can't violate the stay by disposing of it. Based on that case, that is no longer my advice. My advice now is find out how your local judge rules on that issue, because, and I've seen instances where the judge interprets it differently, and you need that information.
Right. So let's back up a few steps.
Wow.
Yeah. Long before we get to the courthouse, and keep in mind too, with the morning show, many of our listeners are newer to Buy Here Pay Here. Some of them brand new. And so if I'm just talking to somebody who's experiencing it for the first time, let's first talk about what constitutes notice. Like, if a customer just tells me on the phone, because I call them because the payment's past due, and they say, well, you should know I just filed bankruptcy, or I plan to file bankruptcy. Can we talk about what the dealer should do when the B word comes up in a conversation?
Yes, because that's really important. And the first thing I always tell folks about bankruptcy is, if you're a finance company, buyer, payer, dealer, you hold paper, you should subscribe to PACER, PACER.
Okay. What is PACER?
That is basically the government website on federal filings, and it allows you to go in and search to see what's been filed. It's free to sign up. The only time you have to pay for it is if you print off over so many documents in a given month. It will ask your credit card, but you don't get billed unless you actually start printing documents. The reason PACER is so important is our clients hear all the time, oh yeah, I filed bankruptcy. Well, give me the number. Oh yeah, I didn't get it from the attorney yet, but I filed bankruptcy. You go on to PACER and you could verify that for yourself. Okay. And that's really important, because if somebody says they filed bankruptcy and you ignore that because you didn't bother to verify it, and they actually filed, you can get in trouble. So it's a good idea to put in the notes, customer says they filed bankruptcy, wouldn't give me any more information, wouldn't give me the attorney name, didn't have the case number, went on PACER and either verified or couldn't verify.
So what if they can't verify? Does that change what?
You don't practice anymore, but would you advise acting, or you would advise call an attorney? Probably.
Well, what I would advise was check PACER first. Get the attorney's name that they claim to be using, and a lot of times people say that they're just doing a pro se. That's a little trick that some of these folks use to try to avoid. Oh no, I just did a pro se. Well, then give me the number. Well, I don't have the number.
I'm not familiar with a pro se.
What's a pro se?
Pro se means that you're representing yourself, and a lot of debtors today, they don't want to pay the $1,000 or so to the bankruptcy attorney, so they file themselves, and they could do that. Okay. But if you go on PACER and you can't confirm the existence of the bankruptcy, and you put in the notes that, hey, we tried, then you're in a much better position to defend yourself if somebody comes and attacks you saying, well, you took action after you were notified.
So, yeah, what I'm hearing, and this is it's an interesting thing where customers will sometimes claim that they intend to, and they may never get around to filing because it costs money to file, and sometimes that's a barrier. And so there can be those kind of things. So I think still would probably consult an attorney, but what I'm hearing is, unless it's been filed, we're probably okay to take action to repossess, but it's so tricky here that we really just want to be sure that we're in good water there, because the penalty for us for, taking that action can be pretty significant when we act prematurely or we act kind of irresponsibly because the thing has in fact been filed, then now we got a whole different set of rules, and we don't have to dig into all that. But basically, I just kind of answered the part about, what constitutes notice. Now, if we get a letter in the mail, then obviously that's clear that there's a file number attached. It's been filed, right?
Sure. And so a lot of times the attorney will send a letter in the mail and say, I've spoken to this customer. They don't say retain, because that's attorney-client relationship. They don't want to take on that responsibility, but they say, I've spoken to this customer and we will be filing. Mm-hmm. And well, until they file, there's no automatic stay. But let me back up for a second, because something that I like to teach, like when I'm doing collector training, one of the things that I like to teach is when a customer mentions the B word, have something ready to go. Have a list of questions. Have you already filed? Oh, no. Well, let me ask you, since you haven't filed, why are you filing? Mm-hmm. Is this solely about this account, or do you have credit card debt? Do you have a mortgage issue? And you, a lot of times you could flip the conversation around and show them that, oh, you've got $8,000 of credit card debt. Boy, I wouldn't use my magic bullet of bankruptcy over $8,000 of credit card debt. There's other ways to get that worked out. Have you looked into any of those? Or, oh, you're filing bankruptcy because of your mortgage payment. That might delay things for a month or two, but your mortgage company is ultimately going to get paid in that bankruptcy. So have you considered X? A lot of times we're not the reason that they're jumping into bankruptcy, and it's really good to get that information. I know several service folks that have told me, based on those conversations, they've been able to keep somebody out of bankruptcy just by educating them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, thank you, because that's the thing. It's one thing to educate a dealer, but our customers are so uneducated about financial issues. They just don't know. And I think I mentioned was it Wednesday or I frequently I've had the opportunity of surveying customers and talking to them about, what do you think creates this issue, this thing where you're in subprime and all of that, and the number one reason given is never learned. And
I'll tell you, Michelle, it's, if you watch TV at 3 a.m, you see a bunch of bankruptcy commercials. If you watch TV at 4 p.m, you see a bunch of bankruptcy commercials. They're targeting you. When you call those lawyers, they tell you to file bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you really have to educate folks and make them understand. I'm not saying bankruptcy is always bad. A lot of times it makes perfect sense. But I've also seen a lot of consumers over the years that I'm shaking my head thinking, God, why did they file bankruptcy? Right. That there were other ways to go about this. So I think it's important to teach them that.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine that when a consumer is just like they're on this bad credit merry-go-round, and who cares? Who cares if I've got a bankruptcy? I'm still not going to get a loan. I'm still not going to, I'm still not going to be able to do all this stuff. And so there's got to be a weight of, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't, I've already been kicked to the curb or whatever. It's just, I'm part of this cycle. And until our customers understand what having good credit means to them, or what it can mean to them, or what it can do for them, it's another education thing. I mean, you can say, yeah, there's a better way of doing this, but they don't know any better.
Yeah, but I think back to the dealer part of this, as the creditor in this picture, I'm saying if the customer has indicated that, sometimes I remember as a dealer myself, you'd hear customers saying things like, well, I'm filing, but I'm not going to include you in the bankruptcy, which is, they're not really allowed to do that, right? It's, as I last understood it, they're
required. Maybe it depends on the situation, and a lot of times that the debtor's attorney will look at when the car was purchased, the overall plan, and decide that no, I could keep this outside of the bankruptcy because really they're not getting advantage putting it in. So there are things they have to consider too.
Okay, so there's and Steve indicated before we started that there were some changes in the laws about 10 years ago that would affect a lot of this, and so many of us are operating maybe on old information. I certainly learned a few things here already today, so I think it's all the more reason that Steve, thousands of dealers should hear this conversation and make sure that they're informed about what's happening with bankruptcy and kind of what to do to protect themselves and not act, because as a creditor, obviously they're uncomfortable when there's a filing, whether it's a chapter 7 or chapter 13, and we don't have to go into those kind of weeds today, but the dealer's uncomfortable because past experience might suggest that they can get tangled up in a thing for many months and not see a payment for quite some time and have no authority to act to recover their collateral. So that's obviously a situation a dealer wishes to avoid. We see bankruptcies on the rise, so there's going to be more of that. So it's just important for dealers to get familiar with what needs to happen there. But let's stick with the scenario where the customer has in fact filed bankruptcy. We verify on Pacer, then we probably are able to verify pretty soon when the first meeting of the creditors has been set. And I asked you before we started, you would advise that dealers be aware of that date and have a representative there, be there themselves, or to have a representative there, an attorney, a counsel, whatever, to be at that meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that the creditors meeting is a very underutilized tool. When I used to practice in bankruptcy court, I had several clients that would have me go down, and basically it's a free deposition, and you get to ask the debtor questions, and the debtor's attorneys, a lot of times they don't anticipate anybody's going to show up. They've got 15 people on the bankruptcy docket for creditors meetings that day, so they haven't coached anybody. So you get free shots, and a lot of times, you start asking the person, okay, you bought this car 2 months ago. When did you consult with the bankruptcy attorney? Did you know you were going to file bankruptcy? Or you start asking, do you need this vehicle every day? Well, no, I have my kid drive this mostly. Oh, then they don't need it for the completion of the bankruptcy plan. So that's a really important fact to know.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that there's lots of questions you could ask. And this is actually something that I've trained some dealers, somebody in their company. You don't need a lawyer to go do that. If you don't want to pay a lawyer to go do that, you could go do it yourself if the courthouse is close by, if you're comfortable doing it, and maybe not every case, but in certain cases, if there's certain facts, it's a good idea to ask the questions, and a lot of times those are an opportunity to educate the trustee as well, because the bankruptcy trustee is sitting there, and based on what the debtor says, that they may move to get your car out of the bankruptcy or to get the case dismissed.
You want to describe for our listeners that are new what kind of the quick definition of a trustee, like what their role is?
Yeah, so basically the trustee, when somebody files bankruptcy, that the trustee is appointed, and the trustee is basically responsible for marshaling the bankruptcy assets and for seeing that the plan gets completed. So the trustee is pretty important in these situations, and they're not your friend, they're not your enemy. That they're completely above that all. Although sometimes they can have an adverse interest. For instance, if a dealer or finance company didn't get the title filed in time under state law, that the bankruptcy trustee may move to get that vehicle as a bankruptcy asset, because if you didn't file timely, then your lien wasn't perfected properly.
One more reason to cross your T's, dealer.
Yeah.
I
That's
put
a
up,
one.
the website you were talking about.
Wonderful.
It's pacer.uscourts.gov, and I actually let's see. It's just really, it looks like it's super user friendly. You just get yourself a login and go. So Steve's suggesting that everybody get an account on Pacer, and so when you hear the B word,
and right I think what I'm hearing you say, Steve, about that meeting of creditors is, if I'm a dealer, I could go on my own, but I probably should attend your October webinar so I know what questions to ask if I'm going to go in there.
That's a great idea. And look, I know time is valuable. I don't always recommend going to the creditors meeting. A lot of these things are cut and dry.
Right.
That they bought the car 6 months ago. The plan is reasonable. No reason to go.
Yeah.
But then there are certain instances where it's like, wow, they're trying to sneak one by. I want to go ask some questions.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, especially when that circumstance where they bought the car a month or two ago and now you're in bankruptcy court. So
I remember one and it was really an eye opener. I mean, this is back, I don't know, mid 90s. Person's driving around in a $40,000 Corvette. And our issue was they didn't have insurance. And the customer thought that CPI was blanket insurance and they had insurance. And we're like, well, wait a second. You got to give us proof of insurance. And their lawyer looked at the customer and said, yeah, you really do need insurance.
Yeah.
So it was just a misunderstanding.
Oh, yeah. Education again.
Yeah. And you indicated too that one of the things that dealers have heard over the years is a phrase that I used to hear called cram down, which is you indicated that law that kind of took effect about 10 years ago reduced a lot.
Yeah, it's changed. It's changed a lot. It used to be that you sold the car for $18,000 and then when they value it 2 months later in the bankruptcy, the $6,000. So now there's rules in place over, I think it's 2.5 years. If the bankruptcy has been filed within 2.5 years, you don't get to do that dramatic cram down. So you can cram down the interest rate still. Okay. And different judges have different parameters for what they think is reasonable for interest rate reduction. But they don't get that big, huge, quick cram down to the value, which that cram down was why, they might have been scheduled to pay you $350 a month. But in the bankruptcy plan, it's $90 a month. Yeah. But that cram down isn't like it used to be.
I think we have one dealer in Florida who's doing $350 payments now. They're more like $500 and $600. Yeah. No, I just heard that. I thought, that was what the payment.
I dated myself. Sorry.
That's another 10 years ago, or actually pre-COVID.
No, but you addressed. So just for those dealers not familiar, that's what we used to see as a cram down was a dealer would go in there with have an installment payment of $350 a month, as Steve said, and the trustee and the matter would get reduced, and so obviously that takes a dealer much longer to recover the funds. And so what I'm hearing is it's not as big a problem as it was.
Well, when you have a vehicle in bankruptcy like that, then that also holds the debtor accountable for if it's is that a chapter
13?
Chapter 13. That holds the debtor accountable for completing that, regardless of whether or not the car is running. Correct.
Correct. Although if it's not running, their attorney could make a motion to the judge. It gets a little bit involved, but something I really want our audience to understand is I don't know what the number is anymore. It used to be 75% of all bankruptcies that were filed didn't make it to discharge. That they got dismissed somewhere along the way. A dramatic number. I don't know what that number is today. Really? But it's really important. And again, this is another reason why PACER is so important to track these things, because over the years, I've had so many folks call me and say, we've got this bankruptcy and but it's been on our books for 2 years. We just don't know what to do with it. I'm like, well, wait a second. Lo and behold, that bankruptcy was dismissed 1.5 years ago.
Right.
And it was just kind of like sitting in some queue because nobody ever followed up. So It's really important that you develop a process every monthly, quarterly, whatever it is. So, okay, let's verify that these are all still active accounts and haven't been dismissed.
So the end result would be if I got on there and learned that a case had been dismissed, then that means that the debtor in that case is no longer afforded the bankruptcy protection, and that we could take repossession action or pick up the phone and call the customer and try to work out something to get that resolved. But just the main thing is that dealers would then be able to take action again.
Yeah, 75% is a pretty high number.
Yeah, and I don't know if that number is still good, but it used to be, back when I was doing this, I tracked this several years in a row, and it was always right around there.
Mm-hmm. Well, sure. and I can imagine too that customers, when they're in a tough spot, that the B word is like, get off my back. I don't want to talk to you, but it's just something, people sometimes will throw around words, or I'm going to talk to my attorney or whatever. And it's just to scare you to back off.
Right.
So that,
well, they see those commercials, the flashing lights, stop phone calls, stop harassment.
Yeah. So again, pacer.uscourts.gov.
I think this is important too. I think we probably helped some, personal relationships, husband and wife, because if you hear from the other room the B word, then it may not be what you think it is really what I'm just saying, let's pause and realize we could be talking about something else, right? So
oh my goodness, Eddie, you're so funny.
So I think, Steve, what I'm hearing here is the big answer to all this is just training.
Yeah.
We got to make sure that our team, our collectors know when that word comes around, that there's a process for how we deal with that. And the main thing is just pause and make sure that a decision maker and write policies and practices accordingly, so that we can, make sure that our team knows exactly what to do and what not to do, because we can really get ourselves in a difficult spot.
And when you talk about training, so the number one feedback I get from working with people at dealerships is, I never got any training. I just kind of went online and read a couple of Google things, and went for. The second comment I get is, so-and-so trained me, they were switching jobs, so they trained me and showed me exactly what they did, and I've been doing it ever since. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that there was ever solid training to begin with. So it really matters. I mean, 15-minute conversation about some best practices could really make a big difference, and not losing those accounts for a long period of time. And motions to lift stay are a great tool. I see a lot of people waste money on them, though.
Yeah.
Where a phone call could have accomplished the same thing. Yeah.
So I'll look it up, but you said your upcoming webinar is going to be on the second or third Tuesday.
Yeah, we do the third Tuesday every month at 2:00 Central Time, 3:00 Eastern Time. Okay. Different topics every month, and yeah, based on that Facebook traffic, we decided to dedicate one to this subject. And I'm just going to be kind of walking folks through how I analyze the cases, the things they have to know, some ideas for training. Because it just kills me when I read this stuff that somebody loses a car, or even worse, and I've been there. A dealer is getting sanctioned for violating the stay because they didn't understand.
Right, that's usually the case. Yep, I think a lot of what I saw in that Facebook thread we were referring to is a lot of dealers who didn't understand, and they're chiming in and offering suggestions, but it's based on incomplete knowledge or just bad information, whatever. But yeah, this is important, I think. And I mentioned I'd love to, and I think maybe we ought to just have you back at a future date to talk about leasing as it relates to a lot of these things, because those dealers that are lease here, pay here have different. There's a different aspect to the nature of the relationship, because they own the car. And so there's a different thing. And so it's a different conversation. I think everybody should know that what we talked about here is really traditional buy here, pay here, retail installment contracts. That's really everything we've talked about here. And it could be different in the case of leasing. So again, a separate conversation, but we look forward to your webinar. I think you can expect that I will be in attendance, and we want to encourage our listeners and remind them to be at that event. And it's a great chance.
Yeah. And let me throw this up here too. This is Steve's website. And I know I get your email all the time, and very, very frequently, especially if it's a topic that I know that our clients are in need of hearing. It's like, get on here, listen to the thing, get signed up for the email, because you can sign up for it's a monthly email, right?
It's a weekly. Actually, we call it the tip of the week. It comes out every Tuesday, and usually the way we come up with the subject is, what did we hear this week? A problem somebody brought to our attention, and we address it. And all you have to do is go to info@ignitecp.com.
Info@ignitecp.com.
Yeah, and just tell us you want to be on our email distribution list. We'll put you on.
Yeah.
No obligation. It's completely complimentary.
Yeah. And it's so worth it. Again, winning the fight. We've got a new one coming out with some updates. And so really, legal compliance is never sexy, but it is so essential.
Yeah.
And so all the PACER, get signed up for Steve or Ignite's weekly email, and then attend those webinars that he does. And we'll make sure that we're plugging that on the show, just to make sure people are there if they've got some bankruptcy things that are happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Steve, we appreciate you making time again. And I can just tell our listeners that if you are in need of an attorney who knows the buy here, pay here space, I don't know that you're going to find anybody who knows our segment better than Steve Levine. So just want to make sure everybody knows how to find him. And you mentioned Ignite CP. I'm sure igniteconsultingpartners.com is still a domain where they can find you. So I've got that quickly. I can throw that on the screen as we wrap up. But Ignite Consulting Partners is a way to find them. So just know how to find Steve Levine, and we'll wrap up there, and we'll look forward to having you back another time.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, thank you very, very much and you're always so good about, hey, can you get it? And it's just a matter of like getting you're a busy guy. But we just really appreciate your support and your willingness to come on the show and share what you know.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. I love talking to your listeners. My best part of the job is talking to the dealers. And finding out what's going on with them, what's causing them apprehension, and trying to find them solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to put you backstage. If you can stick around for just a minute so we can say proper goodbye after we've closed the show out.
You bet. Thanks.
Thank you. All righty.
So the favorite part of my job is hanging out on the podcast with my adorable wife and educating dealers, bringing great information to dealers. So.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's see. It's Friday. Sorry. Whoa, that was weird. I know. It's Friday. We've got for a lot of you out there, it's a busy day. Collections are going to be super busy today. And happy collecting. Yeah. And hope you guys have a great weekend again. We are no longer going live on Mondays. So I know. Yeah, such a huge disappointment. But we have some other podcasts that we are
you'll find us
we're developing, so
bringing education to the scene, just not at 11 Eastern on Monday,
not at 11 Eastern, and probably recorded and just dropped at certain times or whatever. So again, have yourself a great weekend. Thank you so much for making us a part of your Friday and of your week, and we will see you next Wednesday with our next White Hat Wednesday topic. Thanks so much, everybody. We really appreciate it.
See you.